this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. As per usual, very, very much appreciated. Also, last week, just a quick reminder that next weekend, it is indeed the 10th anniversary of the show. So I hope you'll watch next week's episode, because I'm pretty certain it's going to be a good one. Not that any of them are bad ones. Well, I don't think they are anyway. But obviously, before we get to next weekend, we have this week's episode of the show to do. Now, as you can see from the title page, I'm having another look at some of Richard Seale's range. Now, for those of you that remember, or may not remember, back in October of last year, Richard Holland, the UK brand ambassador for Dolly's and Richard Seale's, kindly sent me a big package of samples of pretty much everything that the distillery does. And as you may well know, back then I did a review of the Foursquare range, and it was always my intention at some stage to do a review of the remainder of the stuff, with the exception of the cream liqueur that they do. Not because it's horrible, but because 7 is too many, isn't it, really, at the end of the day? And it's cream liqueurs are not really my bag, as they say. We're looking at sort of two of the other ranges, well, one range and one standalone bottling. We're looking at the Dolly's range. Now, Dolly's is a historic Barbadian brand. It was founded in 1908 by a chap called Martin Dolly and Co. And eventually found its way into the Seale's portfolio in 1993, when R.L. Seale's purchased Ellen, Arthur and Hunt Limited, another well-known Barbadian company that was founded by a chap called George Henry Ellen and his son-in-law, Robert Arthur, in the late 1800s as a dry goods supplier, and moved into rum in the 1900s. And one assumes, like, as in all of the drinks industries, there's always consolidation and sort of brand purchasing and all that kind of stuff. And I'm assuming at some stage they must have purchased Dolly's from Martin Dolly and Co. Now, the Ellen family has actually got quite it's a historic family with regards to Barbados. I was doing some digging, and one of the most famous, or possibly infamous, depending upon how you look at it, members of the family was a chap called Sir John Gay Ellen, who was a politician, a Barbadian politician. I believe he was sort of Speaker of the House or something like that, and he also owned, I don't know if he owned, but he certainly managed plantations in Barbados, specifically one called Mount Gilboa. Now, interestingly enough, one of the interesting sort of little snippets that I discovered about this particular chap was that in June of 1771, while he was visiting, or while he was in Britain, presumably on business, one imagines, he fought a duel with a chap called Henry George Ferrer in Hyde Park, no less. I mean, well, apparently Sir John Gay Ellen took offence at an article that this chap Ferrer had written about Barbadian affairs. I mean, it must have been one hell of a bad article if it was like, "I say, sir, you're a cad, let's duel," you know. Anyway, so apparently there they were, standing in Hyde Park, doing all the usual pacing around and all that kind of stuff. And allegedly they both turned and fired and missed each other. I mean, obviously he might have been a good politician, but it was a hopeless shot by the sounds of things. Or, well, probably more the fact that pistols were hopelessly inaccurate, which was more likely it. So anyway, apparently they both missed. They both hugged and made up and said, yeah, okay, we're cool now, or probably Victorian words to that effect, I believe. Anyway, so apparently, like I said, this Sir John Gay, Elaine, was apparently a man of the people, and certainly sort of did an awful lot for the inhabitants of the island, and they eventually apparently renamed the Mount Gilboa estate Mount Gay estate, and obviously there's a distillery of that name there. So interesting snippet of history. And that leads me on, talking of history, to the other product that I'm looking at today, which is called John D. Taylor's Velvet Falernum Liqueur. Great name, Falernum. Great. So, it brings up all these sort of images of, Victorian gentlemen with twirly moustaches and sort of penchants for laudanum and freak shows and all that kind of stuff, doesn't it, really? But anyway, apparently, using the popular vernacular, Falernum is a thing. Who would have known? It is essentially a rum liqueur, so it's a rum base. It's sweetened with cane syrup with added lime peel, almonds and cloves. Now, I don't know whether this John D. Taylor chap was the originator of the Falernum, or whether it was a product that was probably made by locals in their own home, I imagine, and maybe this John D. Taylor was the first person to sort of make a commercial product out of it. So this was in about 1890 apparently when this particular Falernum, shall we say, was brought to the market. So very, very historical, and could be interesting. But anyway, we'll find out when we get there. Another just final interesting little fact. I mean, you thought this was just about tasting alcohol. Well, this is all about history as well. Dolly's, in actual fact, was the first Barbadian brand bottle to be exported from the island. I mean, prior to that, one assumes that there was exports of bulk spirit, but Dolly's was the first rum in a bottle to be exported. So, like I said, this is a very, very old, very historic brand, and I think it's about time to have a look at the range, don't you? Okay, so we're going to kick off with the aforementioned Falernum. This, like I said, is a rum-based liqueur sweetened with cane syrup with added lime peel, almonds and cloves. And judging by the fact it's clear, one imagines they use unaged or new make rum. So probably going back to sort of like spirit production in the 1800s, one imagines that it probably needed the addition of something to sweeten it and something to take away the nasty faintiness of the spirit. But anyway, obviously nowadays that is not necessarily the case. Then we're going to move on to the Dolly's range. We're going to kick off with the 3-year-old white. This is the Overproof white at 47%, although it's not really very overproof, is it? I mean, most people, when they think of overproof white rums, they normally think of the Mount Gay and what have you, and it's all sort of like we want the overproof kind of thing. And well, it's just not really overproof in my personal opinion. It's proper proof. There you go. So, but that doesn't really kind of, Dolly's 5-year-old proper proof. Yeah, maybe that's what they should call it. Anyway, so yes, that's bottled at 47%. Then we're going to move on to the aged rums. This is indeed the Dolly's 5-year-old. All the Dolly's, like the Seals, are a blend of pot and column still. This is, like I said, 5 years old, bottled at 40%. Then we're going to move on to the XO. This is bottled at 43%. The spirit is aged for a minimum, I believe, of 6 years of age and finished in ex-Oloroso sherry casks. So, could be interesting. Next bottling is the 12-year-old. That's bottled at 43%. And finally, we're going to look at the 14-year-old, which is bottled at 48%. Now, I know that sort of 43% is a bit, yeah, maybe really should be sort of bottled at 46%, but you know, we'll see. And of course, obviously, the younger rums do have a tendency to be bottled at 40%. I mean, again, it's all about price point and all this kind of stuff. And when you think about that, you can pick up the 5-year-old for less than 30 quid. If you were to sort of bottle that at 46%, that's going to stick it into sort of like the mid 30s, which is probably, or even up to sort of like the 40s, which is probably a little bit steep for a 5-year-old. So yeah, you've got to sort of bear the market, shall we say, in mind rather than sort of, you know, anything else. But anyway, as they say, it's all about the juice in the bottle, and well, I think it's about time to kick off with a bit of Falernum. Right, okay, so let's see what the Falernum gives us on the nose then, shall we? Oily, quite viscous. You can definitely smell that there is some new make rum or unaged rum at the base of this. It's got that edgy, I wouldn't quite go as far as saying fainty, but there is there's sort of an element of that there. There's obviously the sort of sweetening element of the cane sugar, and I'm certainly getting almond, and the clove is very, very noticeable. It's not particularly complex, it's pleasant, it's not too sweet, it's not too fainty, it's just about right, as the teddy bear said. Was it the teddy bear? Anyway, yeah, let's see what the parts are. Sweet, viscous, peppery, herbally, plenty of clove again. Don't get a huge amount of the rum character. I'm getting a lot of cane syrup. It is pretty sweet, and it really gets very sweet towards the finish. There's that little bit of lime is kind of just sort of stopping it becoming overly sweet, but I can certainly feel the sweetness on my lips. It's not my kind of thing at the end of the day, but you know, if this is sort, I imagine this is probably more often than not used in a cocktail base, I would guess. But so yeah, I mean, it's well, I don't know what it retails for, but I don't think it's particularly expensive. But yeah, it's not a bad one to start with, I don't think. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 3-year-old white. Now, obviously this has been aged in cask. Now, knowing Richard Seale and how fastidious he is about sort of, you know, keeping things natural, I can't imagine that this is produced in the manner of, say, the Diplomatico white, which is basically cask aged and they strip out the colour. I can't believe that Richard Seale would do something like that. So I'm guessing this has probably been aged in pretty much well refilled casks, I would imagine, which has just imparted a slight coloration. But anyway, let's see what the nose gives us then, shall we? Quite vanillad. In actual fact, very vanillad. Plenty of it's nicely balanced because it's got plenty of column still nippiness, a little bit of spice. It's a touch on the raw side, bit of pineapple possibly. Yeah, I mean, again, it's another one of these sort of products that's really sort of for mixing or for, you know, making cocktails out of, and certainly you can smell the alcohol. I mean, it's not overly alcoholic, but it's got a pungent enough amount of alcohol that would probably quite cope with, you know, various other ingredients, shall we say. Almost a little bit of chocolate coming out now. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is at the end of the day. Let's see what the parts are. soft, vanilla. Again, predominantly column still spirit, I would guess. Certainly doesn't have much in the way of pot still weight to it. It's quite light. I wouldn't quite say it's evanescent, but it's certainly sort of short. Certainly that, I guess the ABV is kind of emphasising that shortness, and which I guess is kind of giving it a little bit of a kick. So again, it's pretty straightforward, predominantly, like I said, the oak with some column still spirit, a touch on the raw side but not unpleasantly raw. Yeah, like I said, it's a sort of a mixer really, isn't it, at the end of the day. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 5-year-old. One thing you can say about the the Overproof White is it certainly cleared away the sweetness of the Falernum, shall we say. But anyway, let's move on to the 5-year-old and see what the nose gives us on this thing, shall we? Again, predominantly column still, I would suggest. Toasted banana, a little bit more molassy kind of character. Dried fruit, marzipan, cinnamon, a little bit of honey. There's an almost kind of, there's almost saltiness to it as well, a sort of salty minerality. It's pleasant. I mean, again, you know, you don't expect a huge amount from a 5-year-old rum at the end of the day. I mean, realistically, you tend to find that sort of it really takes a rum to at least 6 to 8 years before it's really starting to gain some serious complexity. So you could argue, yes, you're getting a lot more of the spirit character. There's a little bit of sort of vanilla, a little bit of wood notes in the background. I mean, again, for a 5-year-old spirit, or for a 5-year-old rum, it's pleasant. Let's see what it passes like. Palate is a little bit more interesting. It's a little bit darker, a little bit more molassy character. Again, does seem to have quite a high percentage of column still spirit. It's got that sort of slightly grippy, high-toned dried fruit character. Subtle oak, shall we say. Bit edgy on the finish, bit short. Yeah, okay, you can tell this is a 40% spirit. It does kind of, doesn't quite have that kick at the end, but like I said, this is more to do with the sort of, its positioning within the marketplace, and again, I suppose, like I said, you know, Dolly's is a very historic brand, and I don't know what the original range was like. I imagine it was probably, you know, 2 or 3 different aged bottlings, maybe, I don't know. So, you know, Richard is obviously doesn't want to tinker too much with this historical brand, and I imagine that back then it probably the whole range would have been sort of bottled at 40%, I would imagine. So as a 5-year-old rum, yeah, it's not too bad at all, I think. Right, okay, so let's move on to the XO. So like I said, minimum of 6 years of age, so this is where, theoretically speaking, the range should start to sort of get interesting. More obvious maturity than the 5-year-old. More pot still character as well. It's richer, it's denser, it's darker. Spicy, raisinated fruit, obviously coming from the Oloroso casks. But it's mingling really nicely with that rummy dried fruit as well. I mean, I've often found that sort of, you know, rum and sherry, or rum and sherry casks do tend to go together really nicely. Again, it's all about being judicious with the use of the rum casks, but that sort of blend or sort of juxtaposition of different dried fruit characteristics is, when put together really well, is quite intriguing, and certainly I think this is quite an intriguing nose. Like I said, the sherry is playing second fiddle to the rum character, which is good. There's a little bit of wood spice, a little bit of wood smoke. I mean, you can pick this up for around about 38 quid, depending upon where you shop. Talking of shopping, I forgot to mention that, of course, as per usual, any comments I do make have no bearing or relevance to the company employs me. It's all my opinion. So if you want to shoot me, shoot me. Anyway, yeah, I like the nose. It's balanced. It's got enough intensity, but it's got sort of like elegance and subtleness as well at the same time. Let's see what the parts like. Again, full, rich, quite toasty on the finish. Again, I'm getting more molassy, more pot still weight, although again, certainly right on the aftertaste, that sort of lighter column still dried fruit just pings through, along with a little bit of spice and a little bit of nippiness. I would like to have seen that at 46%. I do feel that 43 is a little underpowered, but it's again really nicely balanced. The rum is the main focus here, with a little bit of dried fruit from the sherry casks just augmenting it, which, like I said, is in my personal opinion the way to go. A little bit of tannin as well. Reasonable length. I mean, it's a lovely product at the end of the day. It's a good price, and so let's move on to the 12-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Now we're into sort of like lovely aged rancio territory. Silky again, soft, elegant, lovely balance of pot still and column still. I don't get sort of, I get kind of, I would guess this is probably about, I would say an even, almost an even 50-50 split, because I mean, that's got such a lovely dried fruit character, sort of almost starting to become slightly tropical. Dried apricot, banana, a little bit of spice, touch of tannin. I mean, that is a lovely rum. That's a beautiful nose, and again, not particularly expensive. You can pick this up for around about 47-48 quid, which is pretty good. Got a little bit of almost kind of violets coming through now. Yeah, that is a lovely rum. That's a good rum, as they say. Lovely maturity. Kicks off with that slightly rich molassy spirit, and then moves into the column still, and it sort of lightens as the palate continues. A little bit of spice on the finish, coffee, toffee. It's got a juicy and a grippy finish. I mean, it really is absolutely superb. I mean, yes, all right. Again, we've got the same argument of ABV. 46% would have maybe just sort of like increased that sort of spiciness right on the finish. But again, we're kind of talking price points and all this kind of stuff. And you know, I don't think it's too bad for, you know, being bottled at 43%. And I love the progression. The progression on the palate is superb, has to be said. And that's lovely. Right, okay, so finally we're moving on to the 14-year-old. This is bottled at 48%. Oh, now that extra ABV really intensifies the nose. It's deep, mature, aromatic, lots of rich pot still fruit, almost winey black fruit as well, herbs, tobacco, nuts. I mean, that extra alcohol just intensifies everything. Wood spice, almond. Oh, stunning, absolutely stunning. I mean, really complex, lots of character, lots of intensity, lovely spiciness, getting that sort of dusty, sort of slightly cinnamon spice. I mean, yeah, this is what, 61, 62 quid. But even so, in saying that, you're getting a hell of a lot of spirit for your money, it has to be said. And like I said, that sort of extra 5% ABV really is noticeable. The difference is so noticeable. Palate. Oh, the length on that is superb. That alcohol is just giving it that kick at the end, emphasising the spices, bringing out a slight herbal note as well. Also emphasising the tannins as well. The aftertaste is a little drying, but there's that underlying juicy dark molasses fruit which is just balancing it all up. It's got a lovely maturity, a lovely weight. Again, plenty of pot still weight, but that column still lightness is just sort of like coming through there. Again, the intensity of the extra 5% ABV is just so noticeable. It's just emphasising those spices. Little bit of coffee, toffee. It's just beautifully balanced, and it just goes to show you how important, in my personal opinion, alcohol, or the alcohol percentage, is to the finished product. It is just such a key to the whole thing, and that is gorgeous. Right, okay, so that's some today's episode of the show. Firstly, as always, a big thank you to Dolly's, to Richard Seals, to Peter Holland, to Russia Beverages, the distributors for the samples for today's episode of the show. Obviously, without those sort of companies' support, then there wouldn't be an episode of the show. The Velvet Falernum, I mean, great name. I mean, not really my kind of thing, as they say, although it is a thing. Like I said, it's a kind of like for cocktails, really, isn't it, at the end of the day? I mean, it's well made, it's pleasant, and it kind of does what it says on the tin to a certain extent, which you can pretty much say the same about the 3-year-old white. I know that I think there's a 40% version. I don't know whether that's still knocking about or not, but I think certainly if the 47% bottling is the one that I would go for. I mean, it's not kind of exactly sort of raw white rum, and like I said, it had some oak aging, which has kind of softened the edges, added some vanilla, yeah, again, it's another sort of like cocktail ingredient at the end of the day. But if you're into your white rums, then it's certainly one to look at. The 5-year-old, yeah, it's pleasant. Again, we're in kind of cocktail territory. Once again, you don't expect too much from sort of like such a young rum, but it had character. It was pleasant, and for the money, I don't think you can argue with it. 29 quid. The XO, right, well, I mean, this is where obviously the range starts to become interesting from a sort of a rum lover's point of view, and this is where the sort of the range is, at its best as a sort of standalone product. I mean, lovely balance of the cask type, so American oak and sherry, lovely balance of the rummy dried fruit with the Oloroso-y dried fruit, and just an all-round sort of lovely rum. Yes, I would have liked to have seen it a bottle of 46%, but 43, yep, it's okay. The 12-year-old, yep, again, a lovely rum. You can obviously see the sort of the more maturity or sort of the greater maturity, should we say, in this particular bottling. Again, comments very much like the XO. Would have preferred to see it at 46%, and really I think a 12-year-old rum should be bottled at 46%. You could sort of argue the toss over a sort of a 6-year-old rum being bottled at 43, but I really think, you know, a 12-year-old should be bottled at 46%, in my personal opinion. And it would have been, you know, been a nice kind of like sort of, you know, increase in the range, you know, 40, 43, 46, 48, because the 14-year-old was stunning, and it really did show how important I think the ABV of a spirit actually is. It had real intensity and a beautiful complexity, lovely maturity, and you know, all round just an absolutely gorgeous rum. So yeah, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. I mean, I always enjoy doing a rum episode, and I think, bizarrely enough, I think the most watched episode was my entire sort of channel was the Diplomatico episode that I did many years ago. So it goes to show that sort of rum is a very, very popular category of drinks, and obviously sort of Foursquare Richard Seal is certainly held in high esteem. And like I said, Dolly's range really very, very good. The 14-year-old obviously is the pinnacle of that. I'd love to see a 25 or a 30-year-old, but I mean, anyway, who knows. So until next week's 10th anniversary episode of the show, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good dramming.